Beneath the cold, depth-black waters of Ironbottom Sound, the battleship Kirishima lies upside down. Her bow is missing, and her hull is torn open at the forward frames. Found at 1,200 meters, the wreck confirms a devastating end, but it does not tell the full story. Was it American 16-inch shells that finished her, or a violent magazine detonation during the sinking? What the wreck proves, and what it leaves unanswered, challenges everything we thought we knew about Kirishima's final minutes on November 15, 1942. To understand why, we have to trace her journey from pride of the Kongō-class to a doomed war grave. Kirishima began her life in the Mitsubishi shipyards at Nagasaki. She was laid down in 1912 as part of Japan's Kongō-class, ships designed for both power and speed. At 222 meters long and displacing over 32,000 tons. After her modernization in the 1930s, she was built to keep pace with aircraft carriers, reaching up to 30 knots. Her main battery consisted of 8 356mm guns, arranged in 4 twin turrets, giving her the punch to challenge enemy cruisers and bombard shore positions. But the need for speed came at a price. To achieve such velocity, designers made trade-offs in armor protection. Kirishima's main belt armor measured up to 203mm at its thickest, but much of her deck and turret armor remained vulnerable to plunging fire and heavy caliber shells at close range. The weight saved on armor was spent on engines and boilers arranged in a long, narrow hull that favored speed and maneuverability over sheer resistance to damage. Her rebuild in the 1930s added more armor over magazines and machinery, but the basic structure, long and high-sided and lightly protected by battleship standards, remained. The hull's internal layout placed steering gear and engine rooms aft, with magazines clustered under the turrets and amidships. These design choices, combined with a high center of gravity, would have catastrophic consequences when exposed to modern naval gunfire. Every ton of armor omitted to chase another knot of speed left Kirishima exposed to catastrophic hits in the kind of close-range duel that would ultimately decide her fate. Kirishima's career before Guadalcanal reads like a tour of the Pacific's most dangerous waters. Throughout the early years of the war, she served as a fast escort for Japan's prized aircraft carriers, racing across open seas to shield them during the attacks on Pearl Harbor, the Indian Ocean Raid, and the battles of Midway and the Eastern Solomons. By the end of 1942, the situation around Guadalcanal had become desperate. Henderson Field, the airstrip on the island, threatened every Japanese convoy trying to reinforce or resupply their troops. The Imperial Japanese Navy High Command issued new orders. Heavy ships would enter Ironbottom Sound by night, using their big guns to silence the airfield and cover troop landings. Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo took command of this high-risk operation. His force included Kirishima, the heavy cruisers Atago and Takao, and a screen of destroyers. The plan demanded precision and nerve. Japanese doctrine favored night attacks, relying on training and optics, but the waters around Savo Island were cramped and treacherous. Shoals, reefs, and the looming threat of American radar made every maneuver a gamble. The USS Washington and the USS South Dakota waited in the darkness, ready to contest the strait with their own heavy guns and advanced fire control. For Kirishima and her crew, the night promised confusion, torpedoes in black water, and the real possibility of being caught at close range by unseen enemies. The order was clear: enter Ironbottom Sound, bombard Henderson Field, and survive whatever came next. Just after midnight on November 15th, the black waters of Ironbottom Sound became a maze of confusion and sudden violence. USS South Dakota, one of the most advanced battleships in the world, lost her edge in an instant. A cascading electrical failure knocked out her radios, fire control, and most of her radar. For several minutes, the ship sailed nearly blind, her silhouette standing out against the night sky. Japanese spotters fixed on the sudden outline, and within moments, searchlights from Kirishima and her escort swept across the water, locking onto South Dakota like a spotlight on a stage. At that same moment, USS Washington moved undetected. Her radar operators tracked every ship in the Japanese formation, plotting exact positions and ranges down to the yard. While South Dakota became a magnet for gunfire, her decks hammered by shells and shrapnel, Washington closed the distance, guided by radar solutions instead of flashes or shadows. Deck logs from Washington record the range shrinking to less than 8,400 yards, a pistol shot for battleship guns. The Americans had achieved something rare: total invisibility in a naval battle, their approach masked by technology and the chaos around them. The Japanese gunners, convinced they faced only one American battleship, poured shells into South Dakota. Kirishima's crew never realized a second unseen adversary was bearing down on their port side. In the darkness, Washington's main battery trained out, loaded with 16-inch armor-piercing shells, waiting for the order to fire. The trap was set. All that remained was to pull the trigger. The USS Washington's first salvos found their mark with brutal efficiency. Within minutes, 16-inch shells tore into Kirishima's superstructure, shattering rangefinders and command bridges. The second salvo swept away the upper bridge, killing officers and leaving the ship's control fractured. Amidships, more shells punched through the hull and decks, setting off fires that began to crawl through the compartments. Flames lit the night sky as secondary explosions rocked the forward turrets and casemate guns. The real disaster struck aft. Multiple heavy shells slammed into the stern, breaching the armored deck and slicing through the steering gear. Both rudders jammed hard to starboard, locking Kirishima into an endless circle. With the helm unresponsive, the crew tried desperately to regain control, but the mechanical linkages were mangled beyond repair. Engine rooms flooded as more shells ruptured bulkheads and water poured into the lower decks. The list to starboard increased steadily, making movement treacherous and firefighting nearly impossible. Damage control teams fought to contain the fires and slow the flooding, but the situation was hopeless. Reports from the engineering spaces described water knee-deep and rising. Rescue attempts faltered. The cruiser Nagara briefly attempted to take Kirishima under tow, but the battered battleship could not be steadied or steered. The tow line snapped, and the effort was abandoned under threat of renewed attack. With the ship circling out of control and vital systems failing, officers realized Kirishima was lost. The order went out to prepare for evacuation as the list worsened and the ship's fate became unavoidable. At 3:20 in the morning, the final order echoed through Kirishima's battered hull. Abandon ship. Crewmen scrambled across slanting decks, flames licking at the sky as water surged through shattered compartments. Destroyers drew alongside, taking on survivors in the darkness. Some leapt into the oil-slicked water, others clung to ropes or drifted on debris. Amid the confusion, not everyone escaped. Of the nearly 1,400 men who had served aboard, 212 never left the ship. Their names were never called during roll, their stories ending in the chaos of that night. Survivor accounts recall the shudder of the hull, the relentless list, and the moment when hope gave way to the reality that Kirishima would not return. By the time the last men cleared her decks, the ship's fate was sealed. The surface battle had claimed its final cost. Down in the cold darkness of Ironbottom Sound, Kirishima's remains rest upside down at a depth of nearly 1,200 meters. The first close survey, led by Robert Ballard in 1992, revealed a hull snapped cleanly forward of the bridge. The bow is entirely missing. The break exposes torn steel plates bent outward, a pattern that points to a violent force erupting from within the ship rather than damage from gunfire or from striking the seabed. Around the wreck, a wide scatter of debris and powder casing stretches out for hundreds of meters, suggesting the bow was blown off while the ship was still descending through the water column. Later dives confirmed the absence of major shell fragments near the break, reinforcing the theory of a forward magazine detonation during the sinking, and not just cumulative gunfire. For maritime archaeologists, these forensic clues do more than settle technical debates. They underscore the need to treat Kirishima's wreck as both evidence and a war grave, a silent witness to the chaos and violence of her final moments. Today, Kirishima's shattered hull remains untouched, protected as a war grave beneath 1,200 meters of water. Each new survey sharpens the forensic record, and yet deeper questions persist about technology, fate, and memory. The ocean holds its verdict, a silent witness that tells us every artifact is unfinished history. Share your perspective below.